welcome to Crit Chicks. We are on our third episode, and we are welcoming in Steffie de Vaan. Please correct me if I'm saying your last name wrong.
It's fine.
We're here to talk about how, women in the industry and how great women are, and we're talking about a great woman that we have in front of us today. So welcome, Steffie. Steffie, I hope that you're having a great evening so far. She is taking the time to join us in the Netherlands, so she's in an entirely different time zone today. So
Yeah.
thank you for being absolutely fantastic and on the ball today.
Thanks for having me.
Welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. Today we're going to be talking about women in history, which will be Emily Bronte, which is not like one of my absolute favorite authors, but she is actually up there in my top 5. And Steffie and I were talking about how Wuthering Heights is a fantastic book, but boy did it make you want to throw the book across the room.
Yeah, I've read it a lot of times, and every time I read it, I just get so mad I could spit. I'm like, divorce, leave, do something, both of them.
This is not healthy.
Yep,
Please move on.
But yet, I love the novel. It's so well written and it's so evocative, and I can really picture what it looks like. And I'm, yes, I too wish to haunt the moors in my long dress with like all manner of creatures, but no.
The Gothic
not
dream.
Heathcliff. Yeah, not Heathcliff or Catherine, because they're awful.
They're awful people.
Yes. But I love the novel, yeah.
No, it's so beautifully written. And she's so very descriptive about every single detail in the book, which makes it easier for you to kind of place yourself in that time, and be able to kind of picture what's around you, even like as far as like smells and feels. And so I feel like, to me, that's what kind of seduces you into the book without making you want to just put it down.
Yeah, exactly. It's like you're there at the kitchen table with them. It's so well written. I absolutely love it, but I also hate it.
Yes. And even more so now, finding out from you, you're telling me about that article before we joined, about, you said that the sisters actually disposed of the additional manuscript of the book after their passing.
Yeah, so there's letters and rumors, and I don't know if they're true, but they're true enough that they get mentioned by like proper outlets like Vox.com and such. And there are rumors that Emily wrote a second novel, and then after she died, her sisters burnt the manuscript because they did not approve of the first novel and definitely not of the second one, which I think is tragic because Wuthering Heights is really, really good. I would have loved to read a second book by Emily Bronte, but it's never going to happen.
Right. It's so funny that you mentioned that, because when I was kind of doing my research, because it has been a minute since I've looked into her origin story and stuff like that.
Yes.
I did not realize that was the only book she'd written. Like, I've, obviously, like, seen a lot of her different poetry and things like that, but I didn't know that was the only book that she managed to get out.
Yes.
And so it makes it, I feel like it makes it even more sad that she had another book out and her sisters completely destroyed it, which is pretty awful.
Yeah, it's terrible. Yeah, apparently they had a brother, and the brother was supposed to take care of them because he was the man of the house. And I think he ran a publishing company. He wasn't very talented, and then his sisters all 3 of them turned out to be massively talented writers who actually went on to have commercial success with their books at the time. I think they might have published it under an alias so that people thought it was written by a man.
Right.
But it was a huge commercial success, which must have been really awkward to be part of that family, given the age and what was expected of men and women at the time, that your sisters are coming up with the money to pay your bills. And then Emily was just, like, they're all super talented and they all clearly struggle with the patriarchy, but 2 of them do it in what appears to be like a rage-filled yet respectable manner.
Yes.
And then Emily just takes a left turn. She's like, fuck all these people.
It's so funny because she was very much so, like we were talking about, she's very much so the black sheep of the family. But
yes.
She really took that role very hard because she turned herself into a bit of a recluse, not only because of her health,
yes.
because she had declining health because of the schools back then were not necessarily the safest in the world, and they were more about the prestige than they were about making sure that everybody was healthy.
Yes.
And two of her sisters actually passed away because of the fact that their father sent them on to finishing school, or I'm not entirely sure what it'd be called, but sent them on to lady school, and they ended up passing away from sicknesses that they got from the school. And Emily herself ended up having quite the debilitating disease herself from the school, and so she kept to herself. She didn't want
yes.
to pass away like her sisters and actually her mother.
Yeah.
And so she kept to herself, not only because of her sickness though, but also because she just didn't really value a lot of the same things that her sisters did. And so it's crazy that even with all of that, she still managed to get out a book, and
yes.
which is astounding me, especially because women in that time, they weren't viewed as
people.
As people, yes, they were viewed as very breakable porcelain dolls that were paraded around,
and property.
Yes, absolutely.
First of your father and then of your husband.
Right, and you were used as like a bargaining chip to trade, to gain dowries and to gain inheritances and estates. And so I think that's, in my opinion, I think that's also the reason why she was so antisocial, was because she just didn't want to be a part of that society where she had to be on display all the time.
Yeah, true. Yeah, but and I think it's remarkable that you see it's like a weird, deeply dysfunctional, very feminist sisters, because they all rage against that. And they all do things that women are not supposed to do, like publish books, and those books are, for the time, definitely feminist. Even now, definitely feminist. But even within that structure of a weirdly feminist, rage-filled sisterhood, Emily manages to be the black sheep,
which is crazy. Like you would think that they'd be uplifting each other and supporting each other.
No, it was a weird situation. It was tragic. It was weird. Yeah.
It's very weird. And it brings up a really good point, because speaking of that, the reclusive nature that Emily brought, it's kind of like also unheard of in today's society, especially for women, like being very reclusive and very in keeping to yourself. It's quite hard to also be successful, because you're meant to just be always switched on, and always having to present. Even in this day and age, like women, it's so much harder for them to interview for jobs, or even to write books about subject matters that aren't necessarily viewed as subject matters that women should be touching on. And so, like, I want to ask you, like, how have you been able to kind of rise above that, and be able to kind of be your own person, and succeed at what you've done, which is quite a lot, and I'm very impressed.
Thank you so much. Well, it helps that the Netherlands is fairly progressive. It's not we're not completely, it's not like we don't have any problems, but compared to America, I would say women have an easier time of it here. So that definitely helps. And my parents are both very supportive and very progressive. Like, my mom is a doctor, and my dad is a teacher. But when the children were born, because she as a doctor made more than he as a teacher, she basically she worked more hours than he would. So very early on, I grew up in a household where my mom was the main breadwinner, and my dad was also a breadwinner, but so that was very normal for me growing up. So that's what I did, and then I went on to be a writer. So it's like, am I a breadwinner? Well, I'm a penniless, struggling author, but I did choose to be one.
But that is also still very brave. You know, especially because you are also a mother, which, good God's woman, like
Yes.
I applaud you so much. Like, yay, yay, yay for following your dream and doing what sparks joy in you. And it's so hard. It's so hard, especially for mothers. They're kind of put on a pedestal of which they could fall from at any point in time because they want to
Yeah.
do what they want to do. And a lot of, and I hate this so much, and but like a lot of mothers and even even women who are not mothers yet, a lot of them are put on these pedestals where they're expected to have these jobs that just make them all of this money to support their kids, and if they're not doing that, then how dare they?
Yeah.
And that is so sad because there's so many women out there who are so talented and have such beautiful energy, and you know they're being forced into these little boxes of which they must fit into to provide because that's kind of
Yes.
what's expected of them.
Yeah, you're supposed to have a baby, but then be back at work a week later.
Yes.
Like, I don't know, like, I can't walk a week after having a baby, so no.
It, look, and that is exactly what happens. You know, when I had my first child, I was maybe off for 2 months, and then I went back to work.
Yeah.
I went back to
Yeah.
work. And then on top of that, I was still judged and viewed in a dark light because I was was still breastfeeding, and I was still had to take breaks to like pump, you know, because I was still very dedicated, you know, to breastfeed my
Mm-hmm.
child. And it was viewed as like this major inconvenience. And it's like, okay, well, if you're going to take me away and expect me to come back after 2 months,
Yeah.
then you have to be at least accommodating to the lifestyle that I've chosen for both me and my child.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. The good news is that the Netherlands has pretty good parental leave. I will say, we've had a right inclined government for the past 10 years that I'm not happy with.
Mm.
And they've been chipping away as they do. But still, parental care in the Netherlands is pretty. You get like 12 weeks paid, and then even after that, you can take hours a week that you are at home with your family, and
That's incredible.
things like that. But it does depend a little on who your employer is. But it's pretty customary, and then of course there's like dad's day, because it is still dad, like the
Yes.
default is the mom does it and the dad gets to, but it is incredibly common that dads have a fixed day off in the week where
Yes.
they are at home with their kids.
Yes.
So it's weird that the default is that women do it, and then if the dad stays home, it's a special dad day. Like, why is that more special than me staying home?
No.
But at least we are at the point where it's very common, like, only man. I don't know anyone in my circle who's a dad who doesn't do that. So it's very accepted that, when you're a father, you're going to step back in working hours because you want to spend more time with your children. So at least that helps. That's good. Like, it's not perfect, but it's better than what you've got going on over there.
No, it's exponentially better. I mean, like I will say that it's not very fair for the men as far as like they only get maybe 2 weeks of maternity leave.
Mm-hmm.
And women, they, I think, well, it is subjective to the company itself, but they get maybe a month of paid maternity leave, and then after that, you're expected to kind of figure out what your finances are going to be, if you want to stay out of work longer, at least for the company that I worked for. But it's kind of a strain, and they wonder like, well, why are there so many women with postpartum depression, and why are there so many women with body issues? Well, it's because you're expecting us to just kind of bounce back and just keep soldiering on, because that's what has been expected of women since the dawn of time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's like first you had to be at home and have children and take care of the family, and now you have to work, but you still have to do all the other stuff.
Right. Exactly.
Like you have to do both. Yeah, exactly. And I think it's very telling that in the COVID, in the pandemic, that there's been articles that pretty much all the jobs lost have been women who went like, well, homeschooling, so I guess I'm quitting my job.
That's exactly it. That's exactly what I had to do. I couldn't go into work. And, I couldn't even work from home during the day, which was the peak hours for the company that I worked for. And so I had to quit because I had to homeschool my children because, we're in a schooling system where the teachers can only do so much. And so we had to just, um, do the best we could by teaching them alongside the teachers. Now I'm very blessed to have a partner who is so supportive and like helps me teach them as well. And I know that there are a lot of, families out there that don't necessarily have that. But it basically is that, I teach the kids during the day from 8 o'clock in the morning until 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Then we do homework. And then at 4 o'clock, I work my job until 11 or 12 o'clock in the evening. And by the time there is time for me and my partner, I'm just completely, just
it's been ridiculous. And demands like can you work in the evenings? I mean, yes, I can if I don't want to have any free time, and it's been 14 months, so no, I don't wanna. Like, it's demands are ridiculous, and I think it's very telling that all the people who dropped out of the workforce are women, mothers. I mean,
No, it has been. I've known probably, oh goodness, sadly, like maybe 6 or 7 moms that have had to quit really, really lucrative jobs because they had to teach. And because they were making less than their partners, it was just kind of chosen that they had to kind of quit their jobs, even though they were passionate about it.
It's infuriating, and I think governments all over have a couple of did well, but most of them really, really watched it. But there are degrees of watching.
Yeah, right, exactly. But you bring up a really good point. With the social distancing in place, a lot of companies and creators have had to force themselves to kind of think outside the box how they can be more personable with clients and an audience members that they can't necessarily see. But you brought up a really wonderful idea about micro RPGs, which are written on postcards, which I absolutely love. I think it's adorable. It's very unusual. Can you tell us more about where that idea came from?
Yeah, exactly. So I have a friend, writing partner, Liz Chaipraditkul, who's also Dutch. We met on a different working product, and she needed help, and she was new in the group. She wasn't sure who she wanted to ask, and she looked at my name and she was, she's Dutch. And I'm glad she reached out because I might not have made the connection that Elizabeth Chaipraditkul was Dutch. So she reached out to me and she was, you're also Dutch. Could you help me with this while we're bonding over our common heritage? And I was like, yeah, sure, I'll help you. So we started to talk, and we became pretty good friends. And we discovered that we both had a lot of unfinished games just lying around because, you'll probably know this from your partner, but work for hire is you get paid per word, and if it doesn't sell, then it doesn't sell, you don't get money. So we had both been prioritizing our work for hire and leaving those games on the back burner. And then we were like, okay, so what if we make a Patreon? Like if I could buy dinner once a week off of a game that I write, that's good enough. We'll do that. So we set out in 2019 to write a game per month, which looking back was ridiculous, but we did. So we published 12 games. And then last year we published, we wrote on several smaller games, but one big game called City of Flesh that we'll get to in a moment. And then for 21 we were like, okay, so since everyone's at home, let's do micro games. So the idea is you'll get a postcard, a physical printed postcard. It'll be super pretty. And on the back, on the back, it's going to have a small game that you can play alone or with friends, and you can. It's going to have a sticker with your address, so you can write over it to send it on to another friend if you want to gift them a game. and we're doing one a month, every month, so 12 for the year, with 4 bonus games for people who pledge on a higher level for the Patreon. And we are super enthusiastic about that because I love getting mail, especially now that I've been at home for 4 years. And you'll get a game that you can play. And the first one is called Alone, and that was definitely my pandemic game. Like, I feel so alone. What if I was? What if I was the last person in the world? That's the first game. So that was inspired by. But for February, Liz is actually deliberately doing a game that is going to have people reach out to each other to play together over Twitter, or just send the game to somebody you like. So I was doing the super solo, moody, alone game, and Liz is doing the bringing people together game. And I think those are the two obvious ones that were inspired by the pandemic. And then after that, you just get fun games like about being a dragon or being a tree. And they're small games. You can just play them on the go. So the idea is that you don't have to have any elaborate setup. The idea is that you can play them as you go. So mechanics a lot of them are narrative, and I'm also working on one where you simply use coins for your mechanics. The idea being that if you're up and about, you probably have your purse with you, and you might have some coins handy.
You have that actually. In the book that it's actually right behind you, which I'm completely devouring right now, called 2 Women 12 Games, and
yes.
one of them in there, like, I find really charming is kittens, and you use coins in it, which I actually thought is terribly sweet, where it determines like the character of your kitten, and what your kitten looks like and the different powers that they have. I think that's very charming, actually very useful and really intelligent, to just kind of use things that are around you. It kind of installs kind of a tactile sense to the game itself. Instead of just dice, you use physical things in front of you.
Yeah, exactly. The idea is that if we can go out again, you can just grab the game and then go get your coffee, and you should be able to play on the way or play with people you meet at the Starbucks. It'd be so good if we can meet people again anywhere.
I'd like to have a coffee with a friend.
Yes, or just with anyone at this point.
Yeah. This woman had a conversation with me about cheese at the supermarket the other day, and I was so excited to talk to her about cheese.
Yeah, I was at the park the other day, and I was sitting down on a bench. I'd gone for a walk, and I sat down, and this other couple was also gone, and they approached me, and you could see their faces light up like, a person! Hello, how are you on this evening? I'm good. But yeah, it's been weird. Like, and I'm an introvert. I don't even like people, and I'm like, talk to me.
Please talk to me now. Yeah, no, I'm the same way. I'm terribly socially awkward, so I have no filter. My dad describes me as being honest to a fault, and so I usually like just have a very
You'd fit right in here.
Wonderful. Good. No, I'm very like direct. Like, I take after my dad. I'm a no nonsense person, and so that's turned me into quite the antisocial beast, because I have a small group of friends that are like, that's Lindsay and that's how she talks. But these days I've been so excited to talk to anybody. Like, I was shoveling snow the other day, and they're like, this is quite the winter, and I'm like, yes, it is.
So weird. Yeah. I got talking to somebody where, like, Instagram friends. I do meet her on other occasions, but that is more when she's at her job, and that's always. I try to let people alone when they're at their job, like their work.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we got talking on Instagram, and we discovered that we both like Rummikub. It's a game with ciphers, with numbers, and we were like, yeah, once this is over, we should just play. Like, I want to play with anyone.
No, I absolutely
walking
agree.
around with our game cup, like dice and coins, and a game. Like, I'll play with anyone.
I'll go play frisbee. I don't play frisbee, but I'll go play frisbee if somebody wants to.
Any human who is not my kids.
Oh God.
Whom I dearly love.
Yeah.
Really. But
you know when a parent says, like, you know you need to strap in when a parent says, I love my kids, but like you know that you're going to get some sort of response.
Yes. I love my kid, but I researched it, and selling them to the circus is illegal.
I wholeheartedly admitted to my partner. I'm like, you know what? They're blonde and they're curly head. They'll sell for a good price.
Yeah, but yeah, it's like, I've always been pro-union and pro-teacher because my dad is a teacher, so I know how much the job, how hard it is, and how little they, and so I know how hard the job and how little they get paid, and I'm pro-union in general. So every time the teachers go on strike, I'm like, yes, pay them more. But especially now, I'm like, these people should just make $1 million an hour.
They should.
It's impossible. I don't know how they do it. Like, my kid spent the entire lockdown up in a tree. I don't know, like, but I sent her to school and she comes back and she can read. I'm like, how? How did you teach this child who I can't even get out of the tree to read? How did you do this? This is magic.
It is magic. It is magic. I mean,
teachers are magic.
They are, and I feel so bad, you know, because the teachers here, they're very fast, and they have to be fast because they're using the curriculum called Common Core, which I think is detrimental to the kids more than it is helping, especially with kids with attention deficit disorder. It doesn't instill the most amount of confidence in them. And so, you know, my teacher for my son, who is very boisterous and larger than life, it's very hard for him to sit down and pay attention to a computer because he, like me, is a very kinesthetic and tactile person. And, you know, the teacher's trying her very best to reach out to him. So she tries to talk to him about subject matters that he absolutely loves, even if she's in the middle of a lesson. You know, my son Baxter's like, he's like, Miss Flora, and she's like, yes, Baxter. He's like, Montosauruses are the largest dinosaurs in the world, and they're larger than T-Rexes. And she's like, yes, they are. And she'll sit there and talk to him about it, you know, for a couple of minutes because she understands that this is as much social that this little boy can get, and so she wants to try to assist them. I absolutely agree. You know, when they go on strike, you're like, okay, well, this is fair. That I know why they're going on strike. But it is very hard. It is absolutely very hard. But sorry, I apologize. Talking to a fellow mom, I'm like, oh, yes. Let me talk to you about everything that has to do with moms. And one day we should have a show just talking about mom struggles. Yeah. But you mentioned City of Flesh, which I read up on, and holy crows, it is such an interesting setting. And
it's metal, yeah.
You should absolutely divulge more about this yummy setting.
Yes. Yeah, so City of Flesh, it's a tarot-based game. So this is not my easy, whatever you have handy mechanics, but we do provide, like, you can print cards and stuff. So you don't have to have a tarot deck, but it does help. You don't have to be able to read tarot, because we will talk you through it. You just, but it's about, basically you need a deck with something that's visual. So it's tarot-based on mechanics, and the setting is that once upon a time in the age of myth, titans walked the land, and this one titan, a colossus, would stomp on villages and towns and destroy everything until heroes rose up and they slew the colossus. But the thing is, a titan can't die. They can't. They have too much life energy, so they can't die. But it's also not alive anymore. And to make sure the Titan doesn't rise again, the hero builds a city in the Titan's womb so that they can siphon off its magic and its life force, her magic and her life force, and keep her down so that she doesn't rise again to destroy everything. So it's about a city that is literally built inside a womb, and it's obviously hence the name. It's made out of flesh, city of flesh. But the thing is, the city can't exist because in the age of magic, Titans don't die, and you can't build a city on their rotten corpse. And in the age of science, Titans don't exist, and you can't build a city on their rotting corpse. So Nagara, the city, straddles this divide between the ages, and as the ages come to pass, Nagara cannot continue to exist. So a doom approaches. It's written on the stars. You can't do anything about it. Nagara, it can't exist anymore under the laws of either physics or magic. So you play the midwives, and it's your task to birth the doom of Nagara. It's a cooperative storytelling. And you decide what shape it takes. You might decide to resurrect the Titan and decide that it's been long enough and she gets to go free and the city simply stops to exist because, or maybe it continues to, as she walks the world, exist in her womb. Or maybe you're going to decide that it's time for magic to leave the world entirely and for Nagara to simply become a normal city in the world. But you have to birth a doom. You might do nothing, and then the entire city gets overrun by blood floods or parasites that live in the Titan's flesh. So that is your job, to birth the doom, and it's a very weird and magical setting where you delve into the corpse of a colossus to battle threats. So it does have a dungeon crawl feel, but then in somebody's body. There are 3 moons, and one of them is the magic moon, and every time it passes, it gets further and further away from the planet because magic is dying. We're moving to the age of science.
Okay.
But maybe you can build a net and catch it. You don't know. But yeah, so it's your task to birth the doom and shape whatever form it takes.
I love that. It's so unusual. You have to understand, like I am a huge fan of the macabre, so like this kind of feeds into my dark soul. Being able to play a game that takes place inside of a giant, which is absolutely amazing, and you're birthing doom, so that's also equally amazing. So is there meant to be like stats for different things like monsters and stuff
choose,
like that?
You choose a guild because there are a lot of guilds in the city. They're all vying for it. It's a monarchy passing to the eldest child who is of true blood. They have a test to make sure, because Nagara doesn't care about fidelity in marriage. It's you sleep with whoever you want to sleep with, but the bloodline of the monarch is magical, and they need that magic to keep the colossus down. So they do check to see if the next monarch actually is of the bloodline. But it passes to the first true-born child. Then currently they have a queen, and she is struggling against her privy council, and there are also lots of guilds. My favorites are the Far Seekers. They're trying to capture one of the moons. They have which one. It's more like the matter of principle. Let's catch a moon. We'll figure out which one later. And they have flesh miners and flesh weavers who delve the womb for treasures like fire that doesn't burn might exist in the womb because it's a weird place of magic. So all these guilds are vying for power, and there are 5 that you can choose from to play, like the Dream Speakers. The Colossus is dreaming, and it's trying to communicate with dreams. Nobody likes receiving the Colossus's dreams because they're terrible, and they contain horrible prophecies that probably would never have happened if you hadn't listened to them. So the people of Nagara, they use dream satchels to not receive the dreams. But obviously you can't just not listen to a Titan if it dreams, because that's bad form. So the dream speakers are specifically chosen to receive these weird titanic dreams and trained to view them in symbols that a mortal mind can understand.
So are they like types of oracles, so to speak?
Yeah, so the dream speakers are like oracles. Yeah, you could say that. They've got butchers whose task it is to physically go into the flesh and cut it back and cut down threats and parasites that arise or save people who wandered too far into the flesh. So we've got all these guilds. You can choose one of them. And then we've got several ancestries of people who live in Negara. Like we've got a royal family. We've got Medusa-type creatures. And you choose a guild, and you choose an ancestry, and they all come with things that you can do. So you choose like one of 2 powers, one of 3 you get presented with, and you choose which one is yours.
Wow, that is, I love these types of games that kind of take kind of like a mind of their own, and they take their own kind of journey, and they separate themselves from the usual build of, like the basic RPG. It takes your characters are kind of like entirely different, and they almost sound like they're like something taken from the Odyssey in in like a different form, where you have the butcher, which I guess would be kind of considered like the fighter of the group that kind of like helps get rid of the parasites, like you said, like the monsters, and like keeps the corruptness at bay. And so that's very interesting to me. But with that being said, did you kind of base it off of any sort of RPG build, or did you just kind of like
no, actually
structure it up yourself?
Yeah, no, for 2 Women, 12 Games, Liz did a tarot-based game, so we had a rough framework, but we really wanted to tailor it to this game. But no, it's completely made up. Actually, for the Kickstarter, we were like, okay, so it helps in the Kickstarter if you can tell people, like, it's inspired by, or it's a bit like... actually, for the book, we do that a lot. Like, We Dye Hair is based on Stephen King's It, and Dark from Netflix, and Twin Peaks. So if I tell you that, you immediately go, oh yeah, so weird, isolated town with supernatural going on. So you immediately have a framework, and we wanted to do that for the Kickstarter. And we were both drawing blanks, and you're like, it's not like anything. It's like City of Flesh. Yeah.
I love that though. Like I feel like so many game developers have to kind of create a build from something else, like a build from another RPG book, or because they feel like it's what a lot of gamers expect. They expect to play something that is similar to something else because it's kind of like a touchstone to them, but it's something altogether different and more beautiful to have something that is built off of just something that they have got inside of their mind. And I think that that's something that needs to happen more often, and it's extremely refreshing to be able to, and I can't wait to play it myself. So I'm going to try to go back a little bit, because I have 2 kind of big questions, and then I want you to show off all of the stuff that you're working on. And by the way, listeners, I will place all of the links to both her Kickstarter and her actual link to her background and what Steffie does. So do not worry, don't fret. But I want to ask you, how did you originally get into the RPG business? Like, what kind of sparked you to want to create games?
So I think, like most game designers, I always wrote games, but they were like for me, for my table and my home. But I've always noodled with house rules and settings, and new splats and new magics and stuff like that. But I became a professional when Onyx Path Publishing had an all-call back then on their website. They still do if anyone's interested. And you could send in a sample of your work. So I did. And then 2 developers both contacted me individually and asked if I wanted to work on their books, which I did. The good news is that the RPG industry is fairly small. So once you have your first credits out, you can reach out to people and say, like, oh yeah, I worked on this book, so if you want to have my credentials, you can talk to that person, and I would love to work on your book as well. So then it kind of flows from that. There are definitely companies that I would love to work for that I haven't been able to approach yet. Maybe I should just email them.
Just out of took the chance the first time.
I
do it again.
No, they asked for submissions. That's different. Yeah, but maybe I should just do it. But yeah, once you have your first credits, and you get and people know that you deliver good work and you deliver to spec and on deadline. Then it becomes much easier to ask for other jobs.
So do you feel like it's kind of like a networking sort of situation where you've worked on these projects and it's kind of like a referral based interview, you would say?
Yeah, it's partly networking, and it's partly because once the first books are out, you can point to them and go, okay, so that's what I wrote, and then it's so much easier because you'll have a good sample to show people.
I feel like that's it's really a good way to kind of force yourself to be a little bit more social, and it's also a good way or a good practice to teach how to market yourself. What you've been working on, and the people that you've talked to, and the companies that you've been involved in. It's definitely network based, but it's also about like marketing yourself. And what is the term? I think someone used glow up as a term to Yes, I learned what that word a couple of days ago.
Yeah, but no, it's exactly that, and it's like because it's a fairly small industry. It's not like everyone knows everyone, but enough people know enough people. So eventually you'll get asked about people, and you're like, where did you get my name? And it turns out that they asked somebody you worked with, and that person couldn't make it, and they said like, oh yeah, but you should ask Steffie. She's also good at this. So then it starts going around, but yeah, and sometimes you can email people like a year, I think more than a year ago, but it's time has no meaning anymore.
No.
But they announced that they were working on a Stargate RPG, and I'm a huge Stargate nerd, so I emailed them. I was like, first, I'm a really good writer. I don't have many talents, but that's one of them. And 2, I know everything about Stargate. So 3, you should hire me. And they did.
Oh, well, congratulations.
Yeah, so that book is out. So there's also been instances where I emailed people and they were like, no, we don't have an opening, or we don't think you're the right person for the job. So it's not like you can simply ask and you'll get jobs. But once you have something to show for yourself, it does get easier.
That brings up a really good point, and actually segues into the next question that I was curious about. Is there anything that you would like to tell either young or older women who want to aspire to grow and prosper in things like game design and GMing, or even content creation in the geek world? Is there any advice that you can give them?
Yeah, so what I would absolutely do is, because both D&D 5th edition and a lot of the World of Darkness and Chronicles of Darkness games, and I think also Cthulhu, by now Call of Cthulhu, they all have community content creators. And that is actually, the downside is it needs to have a layout. So you either need to figure out how to do layout. They have templates, of course, but still you want to put art in there, you want to spruce it up. So either you're going to have to teach yourself that, or you're going to have to hire somebody to do it for you, or you have to get a co-author who is good at it and who's like, yeah, I'll do that bit if you do the editing. But all those community content programs are so valuable in getting your name out there, especially because on your typical RPG book, because it's long, and obviously having 30 people, well, not 30, but having 10 people write one chapter is quicker than having one person write 10 chapters.
Yes.
So in your typical RPG book, you'll have multiple authors, and there is no way to see who wrote what in the book. Like, they don't keep track. But if you write something with 1 or 2 or 4 people, then it's much easier to go, like, this is what I did, this has my name on it. And I know that several companies have hired people based off their community contracts. Like, you've got Ashley Warren, who's really successful in D&D 5th edition creation, and she was asked for Rime of the Frost Maiden. You've got Erica Fassett, who does all sorts of community content for the Storyteller's Vault, and she was asked for the Player's Guide for Vampire the Masquerade. So it's for neither, that wasn't their only credential, but that does help in having something that makes you go, oh yeah, so this is what I did. I did this. This is mine. So I would absolutely recommend that to people who want to get started. in game design.
Yeah, it sounds like you definitely have to take a lot of chances, you know, and have your own kind of confidence to be able to kind of reach out to people and put your name out there.
Yeah, you do. Yeah, I mean, yeah, because my first GM's Guild book was with Kat Evans, and she had done more for the GM's Guild, and I wanted to, but I can't do layout, and the idea of learning was just so daunting. So yeah, I was lucky in the sense that she was like, oh no, but I like doing layout and I'm good at it, so let's make a book with a couple of other authors. And she handled the layout, which was amazing. And then to make up for that, I did the editing.
That you brought up something that was very interesting. So there, obviously, like, it is a lot easier to have multiple people working on one project instead of having just one person writing out something of 2 chapters. So having those large groups of people working on one project, you have a lot of different creative personalities in kind of one project. So can you kind of explain what the ups and downs are of working with multiple people on one thing?
Yeah. So generally, I love it. I get so much energy when I work with people. I love bouncing ideas off people, and they always say, because I have a lot of deadlines, and people can always tell when their project has just gotten to the top of their list, because then I'm like, hello, it is Steffi with my 12th email of today. I'm really sorry about this. So yeah, so people can tell when I'm on their project, because I'll be like all over the place with ideas and suggestions. And I get a lot of energy from that. I love working with people. The downside is, obviously, if somebody else either doesn't want to work with people, that happens. Some people just like writing alone, or they have not started the project yet. It's like talking into a void. I need to know this. Hello?
Oh, crickets.
Okay, but I'm stuck until you tell me what you're doing.
Oh no, that must be infuriating.
So that's a downside. Yeah, you get very creative with placeholders. You're just like, Eddie, this needs to be a character from this person's chapter, but she hasn't gotten back to me yet. So
just
handle that on your end.
No, my partner writes a lot of writes for a lot of RPG companies, and that seems to be the biggest bottleneck. Is a lot of other writers are either dragging their feet, or they have so many other things going on that they have to keep pushing out deadlines. But if they keep pushing out the deadlines, it means that your deadlines have to keep being pushed out, because you have to wait for other people to get their stuff done before you can start your portion.
Yeah, and sometimes developers are really generous. They're like, oh yeah, we had to give people extensions, so everyone has an extension. Which on the one hand is very generous, but also I have a deadline after this one. And if I take your extension, I'm going to be late on my second project. So I'm just going to have to push ahead and finish on the original deadline, even if that means that I'm using placeholders and just going, sorry, I asked people, they didn't get back to it. And yeah, it's now Friday and my new project starts on Monday. So this is what we have.
Yes, there's a lot of, I feel like there's a lot of mind reading going on, or just like a lot of assumptions of what might be in their mind, so that you can kind of have a jumping off point from there.
Yeah, you're like, but the good news is that a good developer absolutely takes that into account. Like, I'll just put a note in, like, Eddie, this needs to match with chapter 5. You handle that on your end, because I haven't seen chapter 5. It's not done as I'm writing this.
Eddie's a problem child. I understand.
Oh, but he's the developer in this. He's like, you'll tag the developer, like developer Eddie. When you spruce this up, you need to check this against chapter 5. I haven't seen it yet, but you're the developer, so at some point you're going to see chapter 5 and you can fix this.
It's now in your court. Now you must do something about this.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and sometimes they very, very rarely. Sometimes they send it back and they're like, "Oh yeah, we've seen chapter 5 now. Can you fix it?" But most of the time they get it. They get that you have one deadline after another, because that is simply the nature of work for hire. And they're like, "No, I get it. You did your best, and I will handle it now."
Which is great. It seems like when it works, it really works. Like everybody cohesively working together, and working towards the same goal of getting something out there for people to read and have in their hands. So it's beautiful when it does work. Okay, so this is the moment that I want you to rave and just gurgitate out everything that you're working on right now so that all the listeners can kind of eat it all up and do some research on what is Steffie de Vaan.
Yeah, so ironically, I can't because the main projects I'm working on are still under non-disclosure agreement. So I can't talk about them. No, it's terrible. I can't.
Oh no.
Yeah, so I've got nothing on the table that I can currently talk about because it's all still hush hush. I'm gonna say that I'm working with. I recently joined Liz. She has her own company, Angry Hamster Publisher, and I recently joined her in-house staff, which means I have a dedicated hours a week working for her, and we are working on something that's going to be really amazing, and I can't talk about it. So it's going to have to follow me on Twitter. And I'm working on my own game for 212. I did a horror game called We Die Here, which is a small town claustrophobic horror. And the idea is that you play a mortal without powers, and then homicidal sewer clowns show up.
That's amazing.
Time traveling tentacle beasts. And hence the name We Die Here. It's probably not going to end well. Actually, the mechanics are deliberately written to be lethal once you start rolling dice. Like a lot of it is narrative with the GM. It's just like, yeah, you would succeed at this. You're a mechanic. You can fix a car. You don't have to roll. But once you do start rolling, because you're a mechanic and you're trying to fix a car which is infested by a demon, then things start to go sideways because it's deliberately stacked so that your chance of success is lower than your chance of failure, deliberately. Because but yeah, so I'm working on that, and it's going to be it's a consent-based horror, because what I love about horror games is that you can, like same with horror movies, is that you can pause them. You're in it because you are choosing to be in it, and you're choosing to have all sorts of terrible things happen to your character, but you should always have agency and be able to go, nah, we're not doing that. So it's going to be a consent-based horror game so that you can really go all out in-game and have terrible things happen and still have everybody feel very safe at the table, because that is hugely important to me as a game designer and as a woman. Because we've all had, I think most women have had that moment at a game table where you're like, and yeah, so when I'm writing a horror game where your character is powerless to stop death, it's super important to me that the person at the table at least feels safe and happy and comfortable about everything that's happening in game.
They're choosing how they die and when they die and what they die from.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's good. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're going to die, but you get some say in it.
So instead of choose your own adventure, it's choose your own death.
Yes.
But yeah, I love that. That's unique.
Yeah, it's like, once the monster comes here, you're probably going to die, but I'm going to give you a say about when and how it comes. So that you can choose that, yeah. And then hopefully you choose it at a time when everyone at the table is like, yeah, let's do that. Let's go.
But I like that. There should be more games out there like that. And it kind of reminds me of a very, 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 very old PC game called Monkey Island, where you were able to kind of like choose what you did next, and it brought you to the next clue, and then you kind of made your own kind of storyline out of it, which I really, really enjoyed as
I love
a little
those.
girl.
I was obsessed.
Yes, absolutely. Do you have any other, like, speaking of, do you have any other like favorite games that you really enjoy, or what are you doing right now to kind of entertain yourself during the pandemic?
During all this, I'm reading a lot actually, and I picked up a crochet project.
Hey.
But then my perfection, it's probably my anxiety pretending to be my perfectionism kicked in, and I just ripped out like 3 rows, like, these are wrong, and I was like, stop. And then I put it away, and I'm like, once I'm more relaxed and I'm not gonna ruin the entire work, So I like to crochet when I'm not as anxious as I am today, and I like to go for walks, and I like to read. I'm doing a lot of reading.
Yes, I do. It takes you away from the place that you're currently in, and puts you in a different kind of setting to give your brain a bit of a break.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I've been devouring books when I can.
Yep. I'm reading a book right now called The Myrtle House, which is all about the Myrtle House that is located in New Orleans. There was apparently like a lot of really awful, horrific things that have happened there, and so I've decided that that's my book of choice to read at night when I need to sleep.
Is it any good?
It is very, very good. I don't want to divulge too much about it, but it kind of touches on the different things that have happened there. Like there was a voodoo priestess that got murdered there because she was trying to help heal a child that was very sick, and unfortunately, because she didn't do her job according to what they thought, then she was executed because she didn't do what she was supposed to do apparently. But so because of that, she has this angry and revengeful spirit that resides at the Myrtle House, alongside with other different types of spirits there. So it's very, very good.
I'll check it out once I'm finished with my current one. I've been reading, but that was a while back. I read Hollow Places by T.J. Kingfisher, I think, which is also about a woman who's living in this quaint, weird curiosity museum. And then there's a hole in her wall, and she steps through, and she's like, "Is there? Shouldn't this be the outside of the building? Why is there a hallway here?" And then things just go downhill because do not step in the hallway. That's not supposed to be there. Like if you're going into a place and you're like, "Is this supposed to be here?" Go home.
Just turn around. Just no, don't do
exactly.
that.
Just go. No.
Well, I want to keep chatting to you. We've got a little bit of time left, but thank you so much, Steffie, for joining us today on Crit Chicks. It's been an absolute honor and a pleasure talking to someone with such a creative mind and such beautiful ideas as well. And thank you so much, listeners, for joining us today on this cold, blustery Saturday afternoon and Saturday evening for you.
Yes.
And we have a lot of more shows coming up for 3SR. Let's see, we have another geriatrics coming up in 2 weeks, as well as another episode of Valkyrie Case Files. So stay tuned. And also, when we post the video tomorrow of the Crit Chick session, I will make sure that we post the links to the different works of Steffie de Vaan. Thank you so much, Steffie, and thank you, listeners, and everyone have a wonderful evening. Goodbye, everybody.